falls into the NHS.
I'll just check what time I'm finished.
Same time.
I can't see that.
Yeah, 5 to 2. 5 to 2. So to begin the afternoon session, I'd just like you to introduce Gail Mountain. And Gail is the Professor of Applied Dementia Research at the University of Bradford. She's also part-time Professor of the Health Services Research at the University of Sheffield and Honorary Chair in Occupational Therapy Research here at SHU. Gail worked for 13 years before she moved into the research arena, and she's used some of her clinical experience to actually take forward her research interests, and she's collaborated during that process with a range of different disciplines, including engineers and designers. So recently, Gail has focused on developing interventions to promote living well in later life.
Including me, might say.
She's led Medical Research Council funded research, which has looked at an OT-based intervention called Lifestyle Matters for community living for older people. She's also had an HTA programme funding for evaluating a similar intervention for early stage dementia.
Right, okay, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here back at Sheffield Hallam University. It always is. I enjoyed the 8 years I worked here tremendously, and I always like coming back, particularly now the refurbishment. It's really nice, isn't it? Nice environment. I'm really pleased as well that people have put aside the snow and the Friday to actually stay for the afternoon session, which is fantastic. And I will try and manoeuvre what I'm going to say to appeal to the people working in clinical practice as well as those of us working in academia. I must say, in common with what's been implied and said earlier on, I did find preparing for this rather challenging. I didn't know exactly what messages to put over. I hope I've got it right. It's a bit of a mishmash now that we've got, a little bit like what's happened before, drawing on what I've learnt myself, but also around what are the contemporary research questions that seem to be coming again and again through health and social care, and how we can respond to that. So I hope that's all right. I tend to be quite informal, but you're rather a large audience for informality. I can just about see everybody at the top there. Okay. So, post-lunch slump we're in now, aren't we, a little bit? So I want you to shout out to me, allied health and research, what are our strengths? Why? Why allied health and research? Come on, don't be shy, let's have a little bit of energy in the room, otherwise we're not going to get through. Sorry?
Problem solving.
Problem solving.
And prevention.
Prevention.
Holistic.
Pardon? Holistic, thank you, yeah.
Autonomous practitioners.
Autonomous practitioners.
Work in multi-professional teams.
Sorry?
Work in multi-professional teams.
Multi-professional team working, yeah.
Real world.
Real world, yes, yeah. Sorry?
We're cheap.
Cheap. Cheap and cheerful, eh, Chris? Yeah? Okay. Cheap against, compared with?
Consultants.
Consultants, yes.
Maybe I should have said cost effective.
Cost effective, yeah, that might be a better way. Well, why else? Why should they? Why should we? Pardon? Access to patients, yeah, that's a good one, actually, isn't it? Anybody else got an idea why? Knowledge base.
We understand what service users are experiencing.
Absolutely, we do, or we know. We don't always understand, I would say. I think we know sometimes more than perhaps other groups might. I'm being careful here. Yeah, but we still don't get it always, I don't think, but still, yeah. Anything else? People at the top there.
Focused on people.
Focused on people, yeah.
Creative.
Yes. Particularly as occupational therapists, I have to put that there, don't I? As an occupational therapist, we're very creative.
Quite like art therapists, in fact.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, art therapist. Music therapist anywhere? Okay. So there's lots of reasons. I'll give you my list now, and you can think, do you agree? As I said yesterday, I was finding this quite a challenging presentation to prepare for. So I wonder if I got it. So for me, I thought firstly, well, we were involved in this thing called complex interventions. These interventions that Allied Health traditionally deliver are all complex, aren't they? Anything to do with well-being, that becomes complicated because what on earth's that anyway? We haven't really got to a measure of well-being. But things like independence, self-management, participation. And, moreover, somebody said it, multidisciplinary teams and whatever, we understand those interventions in the context of what is a complex service delivery model. So we've got complexity layered on complexity. The lady up there said it, and I agree totally. We can create partnerships with end users of services and with other practitioners, whether you work within a trust or within academia, we can still create those partnerships, can't we? Not just with our own profession, but working across. I'd say we're practical, hands-on, that can play against you, everybody. Remote rehabilitation, you're not very keen on that, but hey, we might get there. But we're hands-on, we're collaborative, and apart from the old people like me and a few others in this audience, you were all trained in research at undergraduate level. I wasn't. I got a diploma. We didn't do research in those days. Got it later on. So you do have research training, which we need to be drawing on. Anybody disagree with any of that? I've got most of it, I think, but not everything that everybody said here. Okay. So I was just then thinking, what's going on at the moment? What are the current priorities? And again, you may have, I'm certain you will have others, for health and social care policy. Again, as an OT, I'm going to still draw on health and social care, because we're trained across both, and indeed, everybody in this room will now work across both health and social care and community. So, am I right here? So, putting aside the cure stuff, and certainly somebody now is focused on dementia, we have to do that. Cure is there. Cure's significance is so important, but we're not doing cure, are we? Anybody here? I don't think. There's this thing about prevention, and somebody said that in here, prevention of long-term conditions, but more than that, it's about the management of comorbidities. People just don't have one long-term condition, do they? They have more than that. And there's also this whole thing about prevention, and indeed it's hit the dementia agenda now. We've got how can we prevent dementia happening, particularly, say, in people with vascular problems, vascular risk. There's a whole thing about self-management of long-term conditions, and it's across the life course now. That's been a shift. So we've got discourse on the news, it seems to me, nearly every day. How we're going to control obesity. But now we've started with young kids, haven't we? So it goes into adulthood, but later on downstream, how does that affect later life? We're thinking about how to manage the inevitable decline, and it's true, as somebody who is getting older, it's amazing, well, it's not amazing, it's okay, I suppose. You realise things start to kind of go slightly wrong, sort of drop off a bit. You're going to realise this is it, really. This is kind of age-related decline in action. So how can we manage what we call morbidity in the extended lifespan? And now, those of you involved in ageing research will be aware of the focus on frailty. People here are aware of that, those that work in it. There's a really big focus on this now, isn't there? How to prevent it, how to manage it, what indeed it means. Does it mean just physical frailty? Now we're trying to embrace cognitive frailty as well. End of life care, that's another huge agenda now, isn't it? And when to actually raise these things. I've got a student looking at advanced care, advanced planning for, kind of end of life. It's really interesting and challenging. Okay, more priorities that I could, from where I'm sitting, can identify. The social movement. People aware of this one? NHS England put out a call to the vanguards. You know about the vanguards, which are these demonstration sites, aren't they, where we're learning in action, really. They put out a call about the social movement in health before Christmas. and certainly Airedale. Anybody from Airedale here? Shane? Have got one of these responses to trying to it's about mobilising the community resources, drawing on that. In the case of Airedale, I've got something to do with dementia, and it's really interesting. This is other thing called dementia-friendly communities. So they're just examples. So I think there's a realisation that we can't afford what we've got. So how can we draw on our resources jointly? There's a whole huge agenda that I've been sitting in for quite a long time now around digitalisation of health, social care and communities. We're still, in terms of implementation research, struggling with the telehealth and telecare agenda, I think, and I'll go back to that. And then there's this other agenda about robotics. People involved in robotics, I know Catch Research Centre at Sheffield University is very much in there. It's all a bit sexy, isn't it? And a bit, it kind of draws people in. How realistic some of it is, I don't know, but it's a really interesting agenda. So on the one hand there, we've got the implementation of what's been around for quite a long time, really, and how really to embed that. And on the other hand, we've got these kind of more wild technologies, disruptive technologies, how are we going to manage that? And there's a whole thing about design and environment and how we can design the way we live and our environments to enable people to do the things they want to do. And I've just been involved in a thing called Urban Living Partnerships, which is another example of a call from the EPSRC, which is illustrative of that. So that's the kind of flavour. I'm sure you're all thinking, well, she hasn't mentioned what I'm interested in or whatever, but yeah, that's just a flavour of what I think's on the table just now. There's certainly a focus on the top thing, psychosocial, non-medical interventions. And isn't that, folks, what we're all about? The focus is that more than it's ever been before. Alongside that, of course, there's the thing about how can you help people to change their behaviour to enable them to live better. So embedding behaviour techniques into these complex interventions. The system change towards self-management continues. It's unstoppable. It's a no-brainer in many ways. We've got to help people to manage themselves because we can't afford to carry on the way we are. It's as simple as that. You've heard that rhetoric in health services all the time. Do you not hear it? Yes. It's more complicated than that. The evidence isn't terribly good because people don't readily change their behaviour. There's the whole thing about the focus on secondary, tertiary and community rather than acute. I'm not negating the importance of acute, but it's true to say that resources have drained into acute services over many years. You only have to look in Leeds, where I worked as a clinician for a long time. What happened to High Road Asylum in Leeds? What happened to all the money that went into High Road Asylum? You tell me, what happened to that? People know? Or went to the Leeds Teaching Hospitals, didn't it? Or the majority of it. So there's been a drain on resources to furnish, but it's got to stop, really, and that's going to stop. And the voice of the public, the end user, is becoming predominant, so much more important than it was, thank goodness, because we're all users of services. So we want that voice, don't we? There's nothing worse as a consumer than going to a service and not being listened to or being patronised or ever. But also more than that, setting the research agenda, undertaking the research and participating in the impact. Okay. So what are some of the kind of things that support us out there? There's been mentioned the collaborations for applied leadership in health research and care. Got it right. Been involved in this for a long time, becoming more and more important for clerks in providing secondments. We've heard about internships, translational research, implementation research. Get involved, everybody. This is your way in for some of you clinicians, for certain. There's been talk during the morning about the NIHR career trajectory for clinical academics. That's a lot clearer now. So if you've been on a master's programme of the sort that they run at SHAR, then your next stop is a PhD, then your next stop is a postdoctoral award, and the next stop is like indeed research professor. So that's what we're aiming for, and that's very clear now. It's very clear that's the trajectory. And the whole aim being to identify research leaders of the future. Obviously, the Council for Allied Health Professions Research, which we've heard about this morning, and other forums and groups to support. And there's been more and more specific calls for the sorts of things that you all do. Have you noticed that? As a member of the HTA Commissioning Board till fairly recently, that really fascinated me. That, for instance, COPD, management of depression with COPD, manualised interventions. What are we going to do about this? What are we going to... And it's all your agenda. Well, you can either let other career academics have it, and that happens. Career academics move around and take the agendas. I'd do that too. Or you can grab a slice of that agenda for yourself and make your voice heard and get involved. Okay, so for me, the research agenda at the moment could have been designed by people in this room, couldn't it? And there's support to get involved. I'm going to kind of go back at reminiscing. This is what older people do, of course, they reminisce. I, unlike Nadine, fell into research, literally, fell into research. I got a young family, 2 very young children. I've got a part-time job, but it wasn't really kind of... I was struggling for cash, frankly. And somebody said, well, there's this research job here. They can't afford a psychologist, but they could afford you. And you can work... Yeah, well, yeah. So somebody said, cheap, yeah. You can work evenings and weekends. I thought, God, that's for me. That really fit in with my young family. And I got the bug from there on in, though I did dip in and out. I've not just stayed in academia. I went back into the health service for a period of time and went back out again. So, yeah, so it's not always... it wasn't a kind of career choice as such. It was a bit more messy than that, really. But since when I first went into research, this was 1987, there wasn't such a thing as an occupational therapy researcher. I had to be a social scientist. That was the best they could do for me. And more than that, the profession didn't know what to do with me either. Occupational therapy didn't want to know me. I was a bit of a thorn in the side, to be honest. And I found that very disappointing. I kind of turned my back on the profession for 2 or 3 years. I just found it very disheartening. At that time, I was on my own. But I learnt a lot. And since then, can you see how the culture and environment has shifted? Now you're high currency. You know, to get someone with allied health professions, clinical expertise and research into a post, say, that I advertise, I think you've really, really, hit lucky here. You are high currency. Do you realise that? Do you realise that? Well, you should. Okay? Because I still hear people say, we don't feel supported. Nobody loves us. Occupational therapists do this quite a lot. Sorry, everybody, here is an occupational therapist. There's no need for this. We are high currency. There's all this support out there. The problem is when you start comparing yourself with medicine. We'll never catch up. And there's good reasons why we shouldn't or won't. Compare now in allied health research, clinical academic and academic, compare with 1987, then you'll see it. The best I could do was apply for monies from the College Occupational Therapists Awards, which did me well, but there was nothing else. Okay. So how to get involved? Now this is really a repeat of this morning's treatise from both Nadine and from Avril. Okay. So these are the things I kind of think, how did I get from being an occupational therapist to where I am now? And it's really hard to actually identify how it happened, because it wasn't for me a very strategic career pathway. It was working around kids and all sorts of other things that I had to do. But I have been very successful. I've got 10 million as a PI, so I have been successful. And how did I do that? And I'm thinking about the tricks, and I suppose it's about, firstly, making yourself known, getting yourself out there, I think. And I did jump sometimes into roles that were new. In particular, I'd say I was R&D officer for the College of Occupational Therapists for 3.5 years, and it was the first R&D officer they'd had. And that really did set me up for having the networks. That was a great job. I really enjoyed that job. Okay. Following trends. You've got to find out, you've got to know what's going on and what the priorities are. And there's ways of doing that. I would guard against, as Avril said, doing lots of reviewing of publications and doing all those things. You need to a certain amount, firstly to understand how to do it, how other people are doing it, and also to get an idea of what's hot topics and what people are working on, who's doing what. I'm always kind of listening to that. I look in the paper to see what jobs are going as well. You can see the trends. You can see the impact trend happening. You really could. Okay. Take opportunities later on to be on funding committees, because that really is the biggest lesson that you can learn about how to get in there, I suppose, and start to understand what other people are doing, what you should do. When I worked here, and so I really enjoyed this job as director of the research centre, there were lots of people in teaching roles. Obviously, it's a lot of students come to this university in allied health, nursing, social work, and other professions. And there were people who would pop their heads above the parapet and say, I really want to get involved in research, what do I do? And these were important conversations. My heart used to sink when people came to me and said, I want to get involved in research, but this is what I do. I'm doing that, and that alone. That's my research interest. I'm sticking to that, and I don't really want to do anything else. That's very unhelpful. If you want a career in research, you've got to be nimbler than that. You've got to be prepared to keep something warm, as I would say, but not say that's the only thing I'm doing. Because you won't, if it's not on a funding priority, you won't get anywhere with that. Do you see what I'm saying? So I started my career in dementia research, but then it went a bit, people didn't want to know about dementia for many years. So people got dementia, but, well, we're not dealing with that. It's only recently that I've been able to rekindle where I started off my research career in dementia research. You see, you've got to be prepared to put it aside. And I think clinicians and clinical academics find that the hardest. Would you agree? And you pick a focus. Focus yourself. But it can be a big focus, like mine was ageing research. That's enabled me to move across all sorts of different topic areas within there. Okay. Yeah, it's been said time and again, and I'm running out of time, take measured risks. We've heard it, and it's really true. Jump. My biggest break was EPSRC, a managed programme, and it was a bit of a risk, honestly, but I'm glad I did it. Okay. Learn from rejections, we've heard about that. Rejections always outweigh success. You've got to learn to be tough, you've got to be like a rhino, to be honest. Okay. And it's still sometimes things hit hard occasionally. If you've really nurtured an idea and you think it's great, it can still hit hard, can't it? And maintain an aura of confidence, even when the going's tough. And certainly in that HTA commissioning board, I found it bloody hard, because most of them were medics, and I found, A, I didn't know enough about statistics and methodology, and B, they were all kind of talking. But I managed to pull it off, and the benefits were that I managed to get a grant from the HTA because I learnt. But sometimes it's just difficult. Okay, back to the research agenda. You've got to exploit your expertise here, complex interventions, and it means these things: defining, manualising, exploring feasibility in practice. These are two of the interventions I've been involved in: lifestyle matters and most recently journeying through dementia. Now, you all know this, complex interventions, but it is about breaking it down into these components. It's never been better, because this is what we do. Okay. Understanding of how interventions fit into the whole system. We did a project in Sheffield called Mainstreaming Assisted Living Technologies project, and the lessons learnt were quite significant. I don't know whether it's worth trying to... The MALT project. So there's a whole list of key messages out of that research for practice. But we couldn't have done that research without these partnerships in practice. It was all about that. It was all about understanding what clinicians were doing, understanding what was happening there and then, particularly with telehealth. Okay. And finally, what somebody said, and what we use knowledge of how to maintain the end user at the heart of everything. This image is of people with dementia enjoying themselves, and this is certainly the current flavour is about how people can live well with long-term conditions, including dementia. I didn't run, let's be careful here. I facilitated the engagement of people with dementia in a research meeting in Sheffield last week. And the blog that you'll see here is from a person with dementia who attended, and she's a known blogger. She's fantastic. And it was such a valuable experience. Actually, it was very badly managed, to be honest, but that's a whole other story about how to properly engage people in research, and people all travelling to Sheffield because I was there, people with cognitive impairment. I don't think it's quite the way we should be doing things, do you? But that's what happened in this instance. Nevertheless, what we're hearing from people, those voices, is so valuable, and for practice as well. So, for example, Wendy's saying, well, we all didn't like the word carer, for example, so I'll leave that with you. We all didn't like that. We want to stop using the word carer. It's people that help us, not carers. Okay, so, yeah. So that's all I've got to say. Jumped through it a bit. Hopefully that will give you a flavour of where you might exercise a bit more power and influence, those who are in clinical practice, how you might begin to forge those collaborations, get involved in Clark, raise your heads above the parapet. Thank you. Can I just say one more thing? Yeah.
Gail has to leave us shortly,
Yeah,
so
I do.
I think we've got time.
I'll listen to Pam and then I'll go.
Just got a couple of questions. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask Gail?
Come on, don't be shy. I know quite a lot of people in here anyway. Is it not relevant to you? No?
What are service users and people who help them saying about what they need from dementia research?
From dementia research, we've done quite a lot of work on outcome measures for dementia research, and people are telling us that measures that ask them to recall what happened last week or even the last day is useless. So they want some way of things being recorded in the moment, because they may experience something really good, like an intervention, but then they walk out of the door and then something bad might happen, and things change really quickly, and B, people forget. And they're also telling us they don't want to have terminology like carers used. So there's an awful lot of work to be done, I think, in the way that we're thinking about dementia research and how to capture the outcomes. So that's just, there's lots. Contact me, there's lots. Oh yes, hello, Sally.
One of the things that you've done for us and helped us with at Sheffield Vision Hospital is be a link with the academic world, so that clinicians really have a way of contacting you and other people. And we've recently made contact with the Clark team too.
Oh yes, I've heard you've been over to Bradford. Yeah.
So that's been really good too. But what would be your best advice to a clinician who really wants to hook up with a group interested and interesting academic practitioners who could help them with their work, with their interest, perhaps, talk to them about research questions or whatever?
Well, I think that's always possible, to come and talk to people, or obviously approach the college. In our case, the professional body of OT. People do come to me, as they'll come to other people in this room and talk quite often about their aspirations. Some people come with ideas that they want to apply for an IHR fellowship, for example. For some people, I want to kind of make this point, it's about dipping your toe in the water. And I'll probably leave this kind of thought with you. Randomised controlled trials require us to recruit people in volume. Now, for Lifestyle Matters, the results have been neutral, but the reason why the results of that intervention have been neutral is because we didn't get the right people recruited to the trial, and that's a whole story that I could spend ages talking about. But the reason why we didn't get people recruited that were right is because practitioners wouldn't work with us. They wouldn't work with us on it. In terms of not identifying people at risk of cognitive of mental decline, they said, yes, we'll do it, it's really good, we'll refer people to you, and they didn't. And I've heard this echoed time and again. It's like you get in a groove with your clinical people and you forget. And they forgot. And it's a real shame.
Thank you. Caroline, one last quick question.
The other way we can determine the water is that there are specialty groups around the region, and we're actually fortunate in York and Northern we have two specialty groups that support various high quality studies, where the focus is on AHP involvement, and those are provided in one that Sue's led for the region. Those are providing a really great opportunity for people who want to become involved in studies. They don't have to write the grant, they don't have to jump through the ethics route, but they get an opportunity to be part of someone else's successful study.
I think
in
that's,
the way that
yeah.
you describe
Yeah.
lifestyle matters.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
would flag that.
the point.
There might be
That's the point.
something to share as an outcome of
Yeah.
this meeting, just the contact details for the specialty group.
I think that's the real point, isn't it? How to get, and that's another way of getting involved, just participating. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gail.